We think just because we have the name Seventh-day Adventists, we're going to be all right. Well, that's not the case. And it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself in a new garment. And they two were alone in the field. This is what we read in Edersheim's book a while ago. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. Now if you understand what this new garment represents, and it's rent in 12 pieces, it represents something about the desperateness of the God of heaven to intervene in this story. It's a warning about that if Jeroboam does not do as his father David had done, the 12 tribes are going to be rended just as surely as this new garment was torn in 12 pieces. It's a testimony to what not to do, Jeroboam. Let me ask you a question. Is there any testimony in the third angel's message about what not to do?
Yes, definitely.
And he said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and give it, and will give 10 tribes to thee. Now notice here, we're going to go again. Go to chapter 12, verse 1. Notice this rending of the kingdom. What does it say? And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were to come to Shechem to make him king. Now go to verses 16 through 20. So when all Israel saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? This is the 10 tribes now, speaking. Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. To our tents, O Israel, now see to thine own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tents. This was done under the spirit of rebellion and revolt and the spirit of selfishness. Rather than obeying God and His commandments, rather than going to God in faith and having Him deal with the treacherous Rehoboam, these men, under the influence of Jeroboam, rended the kingdom and split the Davidic kingdom. And it says in verse 31 of chapter 11, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes unto thee. This takes place in verse 16 and through verse 20 of chapter 12. Verse 32 of chapter 11 says, but he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his hand, son's hand, and will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. He's repeating this. And unto his son will I give one tribe, that David my servant may have a light always. He's repeating this now. Before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen, to put my name there. And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desireth. Now this is the quote we read a minute ago from Edersheim. He's telling us here that Jeroboam has planned this revolt, and he's telling him that he's making him king because of what he's desired in his heart. Now Jeroboam knows what's in his heart. The problem is we didn't see it. That's the problem. When we didn't see what was in Jeroboam's heart, we didn't understand the story. But now that we know what was in Jeroboam's heart, God is allowing us to see squarely what He's telling us in this story. that he wasn't doing this just to divide the kingdom, just to a payback for Solomon. In the heart of Jeroboam was this desire to revolt, to lift up his hand against the king. Now, brothers and sisters, somebody right here lifted their hand up against the king.
Yes. Yes.
These
King Jesus.
stories are intimately connected.
Yes.
And the intimacy goes back to the book of Leviticus chapter 26. That if you keep not my statutes and my judgments, I will visit you 7 times for your sins. And it's about the rending of the kingdom for what we do with the king. That's what it's about. Because what Jeroboam did would bring about the demise of the 10 tribes. Because he lifted up his hand against the king. It's symbolical of what we do at Calvary when we lift our hand against the king, the Lord's anointed. Is Jesus the Lord's anointed?
Oh, yes.
He is. The book of Daniel says so. And the book of Daniel understood the 25:20 in these terms. Notice what it says, verse 36, verse 37. And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desireth, and shall be king over Israel. And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and wilt walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments. This is the same reality that he revealed to them in Leviticus. You have to keep my statutes and my commandments, in Leviticus 26. Verse 14, he's now repeating this to Jeroboam. As David my servant did, that I will be with thee and build thee a sure house. Now, did Jesus talk about a sure house in the New Testament?
Yeah.
Didn't he?
I don't know.
Jesus got this story about the sure house from right here. That's where he got it. He was raised on his mother's knees with these scriptures. When he talks about the house built on sand, he knew the intimate history of the house of Jeroboam. Did he not?
Yes.
What happened to the house of Jeroboam?
Fell.
It fell. And it fell hard, Jesus said.
Built on sand.
It fell real hard. So if we keep God's commandments and his statutes, we're going to have a sure house. As I built for David, and will give Israel unto thee. He is pleading with Jeroboam to turn from his revolting rebellion. And I'll give you the 10 tribes, but you're going to have to keep my commandments and my statutes. And I will build you a sure house. But this is not the history. He doesn't do that. Notice what it says. And I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. And Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt, unto Shishak king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. Here's where Jeroboam runs into that other fellow that was down in Egypt we read about earlier.
Yes.
And the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? I wish I could get a hold of that. That has been lost in history. And the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. It's very interesting that Solomon reigned for 40 years, and there's 40 years in this history right here. 40 years, 1848 to 1888. And there's 40 years in the history of ancient Israel, in the wilderness. I don't think that's a coincidence, but that's just one little thing I'd like to point out.
Yes.
Now, and Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead. Now we're going to read chapter 12. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were to come to Shechem to make him king. And it came to pass when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of King Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, that they sent and called him. Who sent and called him?
The children of Israel.
The children of Ephraim.
Right.
And Jeroboam, the reason he was called, because he was the leader of the tribe of Ephraim. He was recognized as such. He had ambition to be such. And it was from that role as leader in Ephraim that he desired to be king, and that's why he tried to kill Solomon.
Who is Jeroboam anyhow?
the son of Nebat. He was an Ephraimite. Other than that, I don't know.
Okay.
Never met the man.
Okay.
But the Bible tells me enough about him that he was in deep trouble. Notice what it says. And Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spake unto Rehoboam, saying, let me ask you a question. Was Rehoboam privy to this history with Jeroboam?
Yeah.
Did he know that he tried to lift up his hand against his father Solomon?
Yeah.
Oh, you bet he knew that. Everybody knew that. That's why Jeroboam had to flee into Egypt. He was a marked man. Marked men don't just come back up on the high place of the earth without somebody saying, whoa, there's Jeroboam. I remember him. He tried to kill my dad. Oh, well, what are we going to do about Jeroboam? Now, Rehoboam's thinking this in his mind. You know, he's king in Judah. He's the rightful heir, right? So as Rehoboam goes into this little conflict, remember the story how, well, let's read it. Thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore, now these are the men of Ephraim talking. Now therefore, make thou the grievous service of thy father and of his heavy yoke, which he put upon us, lighter, and we will serve thee. He's talking to them about, we don't want to serve in this slavery that your father Solomon had us in. And Ephraim was, Ellen White writes in Prophets and Kings, was the ringleader in the revolt. The other 9 tribes were behind them, but they were leading the way. So as Ephraim and the representatives from Ephraim and Jeroboam are having this discussion with Rehoboam, they're speaking for the other 9 tribes. Because all the 10 tribes were involved in this servitude to Solomon, which they regretted. Samuel rather warned them about this. Solomon said, your kings are going to do this and this and this and
Yes,
this.
he did.
And the history is true, it came about. And now they see the error of their ways, and now they're asking for Rehoboam to turn the tide and don't be such a taskmaster as your father Solomon was. And Rehoboam's thinking, well, here's Jeroboam trying to kill my dad. What am I going to do? So he asked counsel. He asked counsel first of the wise men, and what are they telling him? The older men in the kingdom, what are they telling him? Let's read it. And he said unto, depart me for 3 days, then come again. And the people departed. And King Rehoboam consulted with the old men that stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, and said, how do you advise that I may answer this people? Now, these wise men, the older men, their wisdom comes from God. They'd seen the terrible history under King Solomon. And they knew the turning point was right here. That if something here didn't take place, the kingdom was going to be divided. But it didn't have to be. These men recognized that. In a divided kingdom, there's always 2 parties. Brothers and sisters, at the end of the world down here, there are going to be 2 classes of people.
Yep.
In the divided kingdom. But it says that David will always have a light in Jerusalem. Thank God at the end of the world there will be a remnant, clothed in garments white as snow. There'll be a light. Cranmer said before they burned him in London to Ripley, his friend, he said, we're about to light a candle that will never be extinguished, and it will light all of England. This candle at the end of the world, friends, that God is about to ignite and light, is going to go into eternity, and it's going to call all those that can to escape out of Babylon. This is the story of the rending of the kingdom. But Seventh-day Adventists don't know the story. They can't tell it. We have messed around with all the problems of Wagner and Jones and the subject of righteousness by faith. And we debate about this and we debate about that, but one thing we don't know is sacred history. But sacred history brings all these things together in one story. And the story leads down to the second coming of Christ at the end of the world. And all these stories tell the same story. All the prophets are telling the same identical story. But Seventh-day Adventists haven't been given the tools they need to understand it, because they've been too busy being doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs and getting degrees.